Assalamu alaikum. My name is Neemat Kabutli.
And I'm Fida Abdo. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast.
This podcast addresses pertinent issues that affect Muslim communities in Australia.
We hope that this is the beginning of many conversations.
Enjoy this episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to today's episode of the On Purpose podcast, where we'll be discussing the importance of advocacy for Muslim women. Joining us for this important conversation today is Dr. Derya Iner. Dr. Derya is a senior lecturer and research coordinator at the Centre for Islamic Studies and Civilizations with CSU and ISRA. She has completed her PhD in Cultural Studies and Gender and Women's Studies and is the chief investigator and producer of the Islamophobia reports. Welcome, Dr. Derya.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you for coming and for the work that you do. You know, as a senior lecturer on Islam in the West and women in Islam, what was it that drew you to research and explore these subject matters further?
Okay, thank you. I think in general I can say that my life philosophy is, like many of us, I think living with a purpose. So we are always thought about given goals to achieve, but I think more than goals, it should be, I think, our values, living with values, because goals don't really satisfy us. When we reach that goal, did we live with our values? So these values are really important, I think, source of satisfaction, because as we know, the hearts find the full satisfaction with the dhikr, with the remembrance of Allah. So if it is my full satisfaction prescription, I should really use it in my life. So for me, it was always, what can I do to be with God, for the sake of God, for the sake of Allah. So I think in academia, especially, choosing areas that are more, I think, interesting to me, but also in which ways I can renew my iman, my faith, and how can I be useful to people. So in that regard, especially research for me, because our students are doing research, we are supervising them in their projects as well. Sometimes we are doing research and writing on topics. So every single project is, I think, unfolding the wisdom of Islam for me and renewing my iman. It is really refreshing for me to be in this field. But also with my projects, I think, doing something good, useful for people is very much, I think, motivational. And when we look at especially women in Islam concept, it is a controversial topic, I know. And for my individual motive is, this religion is for me to live and also find solutions when I'm in need. It shouldn't be a source of controversy, but we are hearing a lot of controversies, especially in terms of man-women relationships, gender equality or equity. All these things really, I really need to understand what it is, because if it's my religion, if it's a universal religion, so it should be really finding answers for me instead of causing more and more questions. So that is the drive, I think. It's how I started looking into and researching and teaching about women in Islam. And again, to me, every single thing in my religion should be complete, no doubt. Because in the last breath of our lifetime, Shaitan will approach us, and he'll probably tackle the doubtful areas. So for me, my life is really, and now, an arena at time for me to really understand everything, no doubt, in my religion or thinking and belief. So that drew me to really look into especially women matters. And I'm very confident today, whatever is discussed in relation to gender relations, women, for me, Islam is the source. It has the best answer. When I say Islam, I'm not talking about the text only, but coming from, I'm, as you said, from a cultural studies background. So for me, studying history, understanding cultures, societies, some movements, for example, positivism, modernity, and how they impacted our interpretation, patriarchy, all of them together is a package and enabling me to understand my religion. So differently than, I think, Islamic scholars, theologians, or scholars of Islamic sciences. I think that is how I can bring, and that's something we can, I think, combine to be able to understand who I am in this world as a woman, as a servant, as a mother as well.
Jazakallah khairan for sharing that. And I think that's so important that you mention that there is so much to find within the Islamic sciences and the Islamic traditions about the role of women in the community. But there's also so much to gain from being able to discern and identify what are the different complexities and challenges or factors even that shape our own understandings of ourselves. So Jazakallah khairan for your service in this way. I think it is important because we have, as a Muslim community, which is not a homogenous community, it's a very broad and diverse community, we have gotten to a point where we do need to move beyond just a reactive way of thinking and a reactive way of being. So I guess, in Australian society, what are the issues that are faced by Muslim women, and how can we move to explore that beyond that those very traditional or segregated concept and make it a holistic and inclusive way of being, and draw strength from our Islam to do that?
Yes, we are human beings and we have a certain way of understanding things, but also we are the children of our time as well,
yes,
in our society, our culture, our family. So we are bringing a lot of, I think, baggages. We have a very big backdrop there. Issues, sometimes everyday human issues in a family with your children, with your husband, as a working woman. So it is everyday issues of an individual, but within the concept of Islam, obviously, we have our religion as a minority community, and it's a very loaded understanding of Islam and Muslims out there as well.
Yes.
That is one struggle, but also as a migrant community coming to Australia and trying to adapt, as first, second, third generation. It's not individual sometimes, it's institutions as well, yes, community as a society. It takes a while to really have this transition. So within that, we have multiple layers to consider. Mm-hmm. And within that, I think, first thing, internally, I think the issues, we want to live the best version of Islam, right? Yes. Everyone has this intention in the community as practicing Muslims, let's say. Sometimes I think being aware of what we are bringing in our luggage, mm-hmm, and what Islam says us, what is in our agenda, and what the divine will is. So that is, we can't realize overnight. That's something requires reflection. Mm-hmm. That's why Quran always, encourage us to ponder on, reflect, and also always be thoughtful of, I think, our actions. So it brings the level of ihsan, because when we are doing something, we are doing with full awareness, and consciousness. That consciousness will really bring us to the point that I think, what I'm doing is just very reactive. This is my, I think, modern woman, warrior side, mm-hmm, or this is sometimes, very cultural, mm-hmm, and understanding these realities, even in our community, we can say, although we are dealing with Islamophobia, I wrote another paper indeed called Internalized Islamophobia, because when I was talking to women with niqab, face veil, or women not wearing hijab, mm-hmm, they also felt like they are discriminated within the community. So there are, I think, issues that needs to be tackled within the community, or sometimes women feeling like they are disempowered in certain ways. So all these things within the community needs to be, I think, tackled. Yes. But the good thing in the community is we are living with the same purpose and with the same intention. Yes. Once we start with the renewal of intention, which is the divine will, really we are servant in this world. Others are just, titles or other roles and other gowns on us. But, in the very inner sense, we are the servants of God. We live in this life to please Allah, to live this religion. If it's the case, if it's the intention for everyone, yes, why not coming on the same page and start conversation. So alignment in intention and starting difficult conversations within the community. When I say it can be a community or a mosque committee, or within the family as well, with our husband, with our mother, or let's say mother-in-law. So all these conversations, coming to the intention and having these difficult conversations. I know it's a bit abstract at this stage, but I think once we are living Islam with this, I think, awareness, because we are living in Islam in this country. We are the face of Islam to other people. So if we are going through a lot of conflicts in the family, in the community, how are we going to be source of peace, kind of offered or exhibited to others? So Islam is peace, source of peace. So that peace should really come from within.
Yes.
Once it is there, it will really radiate. It will really start, I think, extending. People will see. And it is not to show people, but it is inevitably, when you're living it, it will be seen. And in the broader society, the problem is, yes, people have very loaded ideas about Muslims. They don't know Muslims. They read about Muslims from media and from political discourse. And now a lot of conspiracy theories nowadays, demonizing Muslims, seeing Muslims as cultural threat or demographic threat, or their visibility itself as a threat, security threat as well. So all these problems, I think, people out there, how am I going to respond to that? If we see ourselves as the flag of Islam and the only representatives, and it is too overwhelming. Firstly, I think, be who you are.
Yes.
Take it normal, take it easy. But I think the source coming from Islam, giving, I think, us self-confidence. Because why I am wearing this hijab, for example, scarf? We don't really want to, this is my flag in Islam, this is that. This is too overloaded and sometimes too overwhelming to carry as well. This is my way of modesty.
Yes.
This is my religious, spiritual, and individual conversation with my God. This is my interaction with Him. Don't interfere.
Yes.
Normalizing. Yes. Normalize Muslims, normalize hijab. And then this normalizing, and also as a person, I think, filled with peace and also kind of radiating peace, can be a good, I think, step to connect with people. Because normalizing is really important. It is very loaded meaning out there. And as a reaction, for example, people thinking that it is very oppressive.
Yes.
And we start, no, it is my free will. Yes, it is, but this is my resistance to hegemony, patriarchy. I resist all these, modern concepts of, being, let's say, modern women, or the criteria of beautiful women, so on and so forth. So this is my resistance. So it is a very political agenda.
Yeah.
Very much similar to women being oppressed by hijab. So I think we need to really stay away from these agendas and start unlearning. Unlearning is, why I'm doing this and what is my inner purpose and ultimate goal. It is for modesty. I want to be modest. I want to really develop a relationship with my God in a sense that I am really considerate of how He wants to me in my reactions, in my clothing, in my behaviors. It's not just one piece of cloth as well. So this kind of relationship, I think, will really bring us normalization within ourselves, but also in this society. When people are asking, it is my way of being modest, it is my individual conversation with God, that is important to normalize. This is also, yes, everyday relationships with people. People may have biases. That's very normal. Sometimes people have implicit bias as well. And sometimes this bias is fed by the rhetoric, political rhetoric, social media rhetoric, divisive rhetorics as well. So if we are aware of that, I think we can we can be conscious of that and understand them, where they're coming from, and show, I think, patience, but also Surat al-Asr really, I think, gives the prescription, yes, and encourage good deeds, show patience and encourage good deeds. And looking at the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, he came to a place where everyone was hostile, very aggressive, to the point that they wanted to kill him. And not only him, but also people around him who became Muslims. And the Muslims, when you look at the first converts, they are slaves, they are vulnerable people in the community, but they resisted. They show inner strength, and that strength really made them the leaders to the community later. But again, that strength really should come within ourselves, and by tapping into the life of the Prophet, companions. And we are in a country where Islam is not believed, so we are a minority community here, and our role is to really find bridges or find opportunities to build bridges with people. That is the mission of Prophet. He came to sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to this world, to build bridges with every single person, even the most fearsome enemy of the Islam, Abu Jahl. So he was trying ways to communicate, connect. So our job is not to cut the connections, but find ways to connect. Just one example, in our first Islamophobia report, Western Australia, we were launching it in the University of Western Australia. It was a big amphitheater and a lot of people. And there was a man. He said, yes, you're talking all these things, what happened to Muslims and this and that. But he said, I really hate Muslims. I don't like them. They're here to do this, they're to do that. And then he gave me good reasons for hating Muslims in his own, I think, frame of work. And I told him, okay, firstly, thank you for coming to this event, because you took time and you came. And you listen to where we are coming from, and I try to understand where you are coming from. I can't understand, but maybe I can make an analogy. I said to him, I'm fearful of snakes. Let's say I'm snake phobia, and sometimes I can justify why it is, and I can work on that. But again, this phobia makes my life really, firstly, it is very harmful to me. That phobia is it is limiting my life. It's turning my life into hell. So when I want to line my, laundry and everything, I always think, oh, it's a very hot day, what can I do? Fear is harmful for myself. And I told him, this fear is harmful for yourself. And I realized that fear, whether you can say, I can justify, I can put a lot of reasons, but at the end of the day, it is very harmful for me. And that's why I ended up going to a psychologist to, have some therapies to handle it. Because you can't, get rid of it. And that is a reality of life. And that's how I managed to live with it. I know the example is not nice, but at least trying to, connect with him through my experience. And I said, this hate is not good for you and not good for us, because we are impacted by your hate. So there should be a common ground. Just, sit down, read, and, understand, connect, and interact, and see if your fears or hate is baseless or not. But again, at the end of the day, maybe even when we are talking to very fearsome people, we need to show the harm to themselves as well. Because everyone loves oneself. And if they see the harm to them, I hope it can at least start a conversation.
Dr. Derya, I just want to just take a moment, because you have shared so many pearls of wisdom. To looking at just to recap, looking at a little bit in terms of what we can do within ourselves as individual, looking at multi-tiered strategies in terms of being really conscious of our own internal challenges and our own internal challenges as a community, our different experiences, whether you're hijab or whether you're not hijabi, how you understand womanhood and gender equality, also in terms of the structural and systemic issues to engagement and what that looks like. But what you really brought out was that self-reflective process and that sort of inner strength and inner fortitude that when we peel back the politicization of Islam, what is our purpose? What is our role as Muslim women in how we interact within ourselves and within our families and society? And also in terms of really using our Islam and the will of Allah as a source of strength and as a source of empowerment. That yes, there are elements of harm, there are elements of fear, there are elements of things that we can control and things that we can't control. But what we really need to come back to is really understanding our own purpose, our own sense of devotion, and our own ways of interacting within ourselves and within the world around us. And I think you've articulated that so beautifully in terms of how we can start from the inside out and permeate from the inside out, and that can operate at an individual and a collective level as well. Yes. I really did want to move to some of your work in terms of your, the Islamophobia reports, and particularly you mentioned the representation of the hijab, how it can often feel overwhelming for women who choose to make that decision, and even in carrying on with that decision, when it can be politicized and it can be seen in that way, and the expectation of conduct and of the way that we then carry ourselves with the hijab being visibly identifiable as Muslim women. How does that come into play in relation to experiences and incidences of Islamophobia, and why is it important that our communities understand that burden and those experiences so that we can have these conversations in a respectful, robust way that are solutions focused?
Yes, thank you very much. In relation to our interaction with the broader society, I just gave one example. That was a very extreme example of really a hateful person about Muslims. But I need to really mention that we are lucky to live in a very multicultural society. There are a lot of people understanding, I think, living with the other.
Yes.
And this experience also, maybe when they look at their own roots, they can see that they're coming as a migrant as well, second, third, fourth generation. So this is a very, I think, lucky, I think, condition for Muslims to connect or to be understood better by the broader society. Sometimes it is silence. Silence of society sometimes doesn't necessarily mean that they're against us, but silence inevitably enabling perpetrators to kind of a tacit permission to hate, so that they can brazenly abuse women. So we need to really seeing these, I guess, loud minority very much active on social media, time to time harassing, abusing, very rude sometimes. All these things make our life really, I think, lower the quality of life time to time. You can't really, if someone really was very rude to you, you just don't get over it quickly on that day, for example. That is human nature. That happens to everyone, nothing to do with that. But I think understanding that not everyone is like that, or people are surrounding but not reacting, are maybe fearful, maybe they don't know what to do, maybe their silence is not an approval. So I think we need to really start interpreting in different ways, because people coming or reporting incidents are telling that I was in crowd, there were people surrounding people, no one did anything. So this is a really, really bad experience. I acknowledge that, and that is very distressing as well. But I think if we just, focus on that, we will start feeling alienated, as if, people don't want us, as if everyone is backing the perpetrator. But let's look at the flip side. For example, in the time of Lind Cafe siege, there was a woman, he just started a campaign, I'll ride with you.
Yes.
And it just became like a motto, everyone is telling one another, and people were supporting each other. It really showed, even after the Christchurch as well, people showing support to their local mosques, you know, dropping notes of support or flowers, attending vigils. So it seems like people are there, they just need a gentle push, really. Once there is a gentle push, they start showing action or support. So I think, as, let's say, potential victims, or, you know, we can be targets of an anti-Muslim, you know, hate. If it happens, it doesn't necessarily mean that silent people are supportive of the perpetrator. We should really get rid of this idea. And the examples coming to Islamophobia register also show that sometimes if we mobilize bystanders, they start acting. For example, there was a woman, she was very scared of a man following her at night. She just wanted to, you know, get rid of him. She couldn't, so she ran into a restaurant. And then there is a crazy man following me, and she was shaking, and people, you know, were just looking, protecting her, looking outside. And then one man with his son coming and asking if she's okay. Another example was in a shopping center. A woman with her children was abused, and she was really mad at the perpetrator, and she started crying, and then she was saying and calling people, "Don't you hear him, what he's telling me?" And people started to pay attention. And they came and they started, "Can you help me?" She was actively seeking help. That's a very important strategy that I learned from some reporters' cases. So when she started mobilizing people around her, actively seeking help, directly asking people's help, and then people were responsive, helping. If she has, for example, children, people are really families are coming and helping, and even in that, for example, case, the perpetrator ran away, and she was really upset. One of them took her to the security guard. Others look after her children, and another Muslim woman came. And she wasn't hijabi. She said she started to she stopped wearing scarf because of this and that. And then she was the one looking after children. So there was a really big support story after that incident. It's really all about mobilizing bystanders. And sometimes we can be distressed, we can be fearful, we may not necessarily think about mobilizing others, but there are good examples. Maybe we can start following and mobilizing others. But also, as bystanders, we are also trying to raise awareness with these reports that this is not Muslims' problem, it's a social cohesion issue. And this issue is a kind of a bad culture in house. It is not the child who is abused or kind of slapped has the responsibility to fix it. Absolutely. It is in-house problem. It should be the privileged people, or let's say parents in-house, who have more power to maintain the society, or in that case the house management should be in charge. So bringing that awareness to the broader society, it can include, I think, it can include governments or anti-racism organizations. It can be Muslim community organizations as well, and trying to really reach out and tell that that is a problem of our society, a social cohesion problem. So it is important to mobilize bystanders. So if we are on the same page, we are not really looking for favoritism for Muslims. If it is racism, we are against all sort of racism. If it's hate crime or subcrime, we are against all these sort of hates, sorts of hate. So I think if it is about intolerance, by default, it is against the spirit of our religion and Muslim behavior. So we are against intolerance, showing it in-house, in community, but also declaring it in the broader society, which will bring people to a common sense.
Yes.
So we can utilize this common sense because, for example, nowadays it is far-right extremism demonizing Muslims again and again, and in a very severe level, very severe level. It is very threatening, but the message should be, okay, when you look at these ideologies, they're anti-women, anti-race, anti-ethnic, so they're anti of everything. So they are really after white supremacy, and the rest just rubbish for them. So bringing that, I think, common mentality behind this behavior, showing people the broader picture is also important. Today, Muslims are weak, minority communities, and Islamophobia is the most commonly accepted and practiced everyday racism. So they're really tapping into it. It is because every ideology wants to be popular, and to be a populist ideology, the way they start divisive, rhetoric is start with Muslims. It's not Jews, but Muslims at this stage. But after Muslims, it will be Jews. After that, it will be this community, that community. And that's a threat, a big threat for the system, for the democracy. So if we can see a bigger picture, we will see that we are not left alone as Muslims, because this is, again, we need to see a bigger picture as a whole society, so that we can start tackling the problem and start preventative measures. So this is the ideological part. Everyday part was really mobilizing bystanders, but also these are things that we can do with the other. But that's all we can do. At the end of the day, we can't control another person's speech, behavior, abuse, or mentality. So what can we do? As individuals, I think we can control only ourselves. It is like, I'm a teenager parent, and I think a lot of people can, I think, connect with it. So we're always told as parents, what you can do is, as parents, only, you can control yourself. You can't really, even you can't control your teenager, for example. At the end of the day, it is their decision and they do it. Very much similar with every person. We can't control our abusive neighbor. We can't control our abusive colleague or co-worker, or just a person on the train. What can I do? So I think we should really get rid of this victim mentality. Islam gives us the strength, and the superior person is the one with, showing righteousness. And this is the closeness of Allah. And so once I lean on my Allah, my God, that is the source of power. Everything is with me. All the universe is with me, working with me, for me, and under my servanthood, because Allah made everything as a servant. So that strength is spiritual strength. I am here, and that is spiritual strength. Another thing is, I did nothing wrong. That is a very much, I think, very big source of strength as well. Once you know, even if you are Muslim, oppressed, if you know that you did nothing wrong, that is an inner strength as well. It gives strength. And the other thing is, also emotionally, also mentally, if we are high in spirit, I think we can sometimes manage hate. So if someone is really abusing us, we can go on top of it. And I gave these examples in a few talks, and I really like it. In a petrol station, a woman was very aggressive to a Muslim woman, and she was very hateful, hate speeches and very foul language. And the Muslim woman got closer to her, looked into her eyes, and she said, "You don't look okay today. Are you okay? Are you fine?" And this was really very considered approach, she's not confronting or back talking, or she is showing a genuinely considerate response and saying that, are you okay? You don't look good today.
Yeah.
And this is also including a message that the problem is with you, not with me.
Absolutely.
Are you okay? Did you have a fight at home with your husband or something, or with your child? So really, it is really gently reflecting back.
The mirror, straight back.
Yes, you just, it is about you, but without confronting, because an angry perpetrator can do anything. So having this, but also, again, the methodology is coming from our religion. Prophet, peace be upon him, showed deep concern. That deep concern, being very considerate of the other, is a really important religion. Even, Prophet, peace be upon him, for his people in Taif, stoning him, he was opening his hands and saying and making dua. They do because they don't know.
Yes.
If they had known, they wouldn't have done it. So that kind of, I think, justifying what they're doing. They don't know about Islam. They don't know about Muslims. Poor people, they didn't have any relative, any maybe person to interact with genuinely. So they don't really know about us. Yeah. Maybe that can be the source of, I think, strength. That should be the source of strength.
I just think that is so powerful, what you've been able to identify. And I think there's so many elements to what that spiritual activism can look like, and framing our experiences in our prophetic tradition. But also what you mentioned about that a healthy, democratic, multicultural, multi-faith society is a socially cohesive society, is a society which provides equal opportunity, agency for all of its members, and also works proactively to combat, extremist and challenging ideologies. And the reason that we of course know that Muslim men experience this type of discrimination, and as you mentioned, a whole range of other minority groups in Australian societies face discrimination. I think it's also important to note that Islamophobia is an anti-racist ideology that is increasing, one of the most prevalent, and often it sort of politically gets left out in terms of the divide between racial discrimination and religious vilification, and that, which is, we're not going to have the time to get into that too much, but I think that is an important point to bring out. But I think what's important in this conversation, and I think why we're, as Muslim women, speaking about Muslim women's experiences on this issue, not to exclude Muslim men and not to exclude the role that as individuals and communities and as a society, we all need to play a proactive role in advocating for it, is because by and large what we find through your research is that the women's experience of violence in public spaces very much mirrors women's experience of violence in private spaces, whether it's domestic abuse or family conflict. And what we find is that it's very much perpetrated by white Anglo-Saxon men against Muslim women, usually wearing hijab, which is very much a power imbalance and inequity in terms of from a social construct point of view, not from a spiritual activism point of view. But very much, I think what it shows is that we need to empower ourselves as Muslim women and ourselves as communities at every level, at an individual level, as at a peer group level, and structurally we need to be heard and show that these experiences are not separate to just us. They actually feed into a harmful product in our society. And I think, another part of that element that you spoke about, and I just want to link your work a little bit to agency as a community, because I think it is harmful, and we see that sometimes the challenges that women face in public spaces, navigating, their schooling, their employment. I think through your research, we also found that sometimes it's not just by someone that they don't know in a public space, that sometimes it's actually experienced by people that they do know in schooling or working environments. And I think if we're talking about the importance of advocacy for Muslim women, then what it shows is that we actually need to tackle it at every strategy and at every angle. And it needs to support the Muslim woman, and by extension, the Muslim family unit and society more broadly, at every stage at a woman's life. If the women are experiencing this harm online, in public spaces, sometimes at school, sometimes in workplaces, sometimes just going about running their errands, then we do need multi-tiered approaches, and we do need to have this conversation, not to be victims, not to diminish our power, but to say, actually, we can name the issue and we can change it, and we can do it utilizing an array of strategies, and we can do it from a collective. This is not just a women's issue. Just because women are responding to that as from that inequality of power, from, in terms of aggression, or as from a perpetrator or a victim, well, actually, this is my daughter, this is my wife, this is my mother, this is my, how do we connect and understand and unpack each other's experiences as individuals, as interrelated beings, and work to make sure that we create a process where we minimize and reduce harm individually, spiritually, because we don't want women in our faith not connecting with their Islam, not connecting with their creator, because of the noise and the pollution and the stresses and the challenges, which you've so beautifully articulated in saying, well, this is not exclusive to you. This is not your issue that you need to deal with. And this is actually being reflected through the life of the Prophet ﷺ and the women and the companions that also, walk that path as well with him. So I guess in taking that approach, what is it that we can do to make sure that advocacy is so fundamental, and it's inclusive, and it's holistic, and it's in a way that is fundamental with our Islam, and not putting us against each other, because that's not the purpose of this, and in a way that is empowering.
Yes.
Just to wrap it up.
I think, yes, you really beautifully mentioned the fact that it's not just one everyday racism. There are multiple, contexts where we can see racism, anti-Muslim racism. So that require multiple approaches.
Yes.
For example, one is, I think Muslim Women Association is beautifully doing that. I think talking to women, not necessarily Muslim, but also called communities, and broader Muslim, broader women's societies or communities, because as you mentioned, yes, domestic violence is a big problem around the world, in Australia, including Muslim community, but domestic problem is a very global problem, domestic violence. But now we're seeing public violence.
Yes.
And we should start showing attention to this as well before it gets worse.
Yes.
So this is a public violence of women. So bringing women into, this together and organizing, and I think standing up against this. Doesn't matter which women, which ideology, thought, or religion, but at the end of the day, there is a very gendered aspect.
Yes.
Sexism, men are abusing women with children.
Yeah.
So that is a problem, a public violence in this case, and that needs to be tackled as well. Another thing is, for example, the impact sometimes, if it's a work discrimination, for example, it can be by the manager or colleague. It reduces life quality. It's just, you can't get promotion and everything. Or even in a job interview, for example, people are just discriminated, and they're openly told that they don't prefer them because they pray a few times a day and they don't want to give break, or just the hijab, or they explicitly express. So on basis of religion, people are discriminated at work, even before going to work market in that job employment stage. It is causing, I think, shrink. So community is shrinking back, going to community and then working. It is a big vicious circle, to be honest. So they can't really go into an upper class. Education is giving social upward mobility, but it is broken.
Yes.
It is a big problem to address, and it is systemic. So
Yes.
systemic problem really needs, and again, this is very much applicable to sexism. When you see all these CEOs around the world, including Australia, the percentage is all too high. You can see the sexism there. It's not because women are not successful or eligible for that position, but it is very much sexism or racism. When you look at people from different backgrounds, not Anglo, non-Anglo, are not going to these level of higher positions. in many countries, including Australia, likewise, Muslims are dealing with another layer. I think Muslims should be up for any source or any type of discrimination. If we are there for people, we will see people are for us, staying with us, standing with us, and saying that this is not acceptable. It is a discrimination. So I think Muslim community, as I said, should be up for others. In terms of resisting discrimination of any type. And we will find these people on our side as well. That's one thing. And the other is, yes, it is Muslim, but a Muslim woman affected by Islamophobia is not the only person really facing the toll. Affecting children, affecting health environment, is something discussed on the dinner table, for example. Just it is a relational Islamophobia. Children are in fear. Husband is anxious. He doesn't know how to protect his wife. So all this anxiety is really very much infused into family as well. And this can be in every family is consisting of the community. So this is a very big shared problem. It's not women's problem within the community, but also as organizations, I always say, we have organizations, we have sometimes priorities, goals, ambition. We want to be the leading organization, and competition sometimes it can be healthy or unhealthy, but it is there. Whatever it is, we can have different priorities as organizations as well. But when it comes to this problem, we need solidarity first within itself. If we want solidarity with people outside, we need to build that solidarity firstly in-house. So it should be every organization's priority to tackle Islamophobia. And it can be, for example, Islamophobia Register is providing services, advocacy services for victims, but also collecting reports. This is very important. Our members of the community should know that we should encourage everyone to report as much as they can. We can fund, we can do maybe more smoother, easier ways to report. So we are using our own facilities at this moment, but it can be advanced. So if there's a really good, I think, source for reporting, because all these reports are really turning into numbers and stories, and then they're presented to important, I think, policymakers like attorneys general, state parliament, federal parliament, and everyone cannot really ignore these numbers anymore. So really, knowledge is power, and if you go to them with stats, it makes, I think, they can't ignore it, they can't deny it. Media, we are always blaming media, but media is equally helpful. Last report was introduced to 750 million people through media, social media. I was getting calls from Japan, India, England, Britain, and different parts. So there is an awareness if we start utilizing available resources. One source we see media, it can be used. There are good willing people and journalists to help, so utilize them, utilize the broader society, but also as organizations in Australia. I'm running as, for example, a psychology service or consultation service. Just tell how you can, for example, minimize Islamophobia and provide or contribute to women's well-being. If it is an education for an institution for education for children, for different purposes, just prioritize this so that we can build a very resilient community who can tackle with it. I think we have a lot to learn from Jewish community. Jewish community ethnically are on, very solid community, but when you look at their philosophies, thinking, even belief level, they are very diverse. But when it comes to anti-Semitism, they're all on the same page. So they're working in coordination because there is a threat for their own existence, because people don't want you here. So this is a very existential problem for every single person. So we are, as sisters and brothers in the same family of Islam, can be sometimes competing, sometimes conflicting, sometimes arguing, sometimes in prioritizing other things. But really, when it comes to Islamophobia, we need to show a very strong solidarity, men, women, children, everyone. Because interestingly, when we were talking to Muslim women, they were really worried about children more than themselves.
Yeah.
We went through their experiences, of Islamophobia. They just explained, but when it came to the question of what do you expect for your children?
Yeah.
And they started crying, a lot of women. So it is very soft point of women. So I think for our future generation to be resilient, strong, and also claiming their rights in this country as Australian citizens, we need this solidarity inside and strong connections with the system. It can be political, it can be media, but I think that solidarity is something to do. And I think we have a lot to learn from Jewish sisters and brothers, how they are alert about anti-Semitism and how they don't allow it in social media and physical circumstances as well.
Dr. Derya, thank you for your time, for your knowledge, for your contributions and your insights. We are so sincerely grateful for the work that you do, for sharing your time with us, for supporting our communities in utilizing difficult and challenging experiences, but turning them into something that can be coordinated and something that can show an evidence base and utilized as a source of good and a source of empowerment. So thank you so much for your time. There is so much more that we could discuss, but I think we've just got the tip of the iceberg. But thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to ongoing conversations about this.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much, Animat. But also, let me also highlight Islamophobia Register Australia is receiving reports and providing advocacy victim support services to victims. So our community is welcome to always seek support, but also keep reporting and encouraging people to report, because these numbers, these experiences should be recognized.
Yes.
And that's why it's really important to report. I just invite everyone in our community to raise awareness about reporting and not accepting in silence. That's not healthy for our own well-being, but also for, I think, making change. We need data. That's why we need these reports as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you.